And good morning and welcome. I'm Jennifer Britton. I'm the author of PlanDoTrack, as well as Effective Virtual Conversations. And my guess is if you are a remote or virtual team leader or team member, remote worker, someone who's working from anywhere or working remote, hopefully you've come across my resources. I host these calls once a month, and today's focus is really all about remote team skills. Earlier this year in 2019, I released the PlanDoTrack Workbook and Planner, which is geared to remote employees of all stripes. And it's really grounded in this notion that consistent action plus daily steps that are grounded in focused attention will create momentum. As a former virtual remote team leader myself, and as someone who has run a remote business for 15 years now, I know that it's not only about taking the daily steps, but it's also about taking those focused daily steps. So this work is really for you as a remote worker in all the differences. And as the months roll out from here, you'll be hearing me talk a lot more about the different remote and virtual pathways that exist. We are seeing an explosion of remote work today in the landscape. In fact, this past summer, Harvard Business Review published a great article on the growth of remote work. So definitely check that out in HBR, all about remote work. I have been hosting calls about remote work for the last 3 to 5 years. I've been blogging on the topic since 2005. It really is near and dear to my heart. So some of this is going to be pulled from my 2017 book, Effective Virtual Conversations. The last third of the book really addresses virtual and remote team leadership and teamwork issues. And of course, I'm pulling from PlanDoTrack, which you see. These are analog planners, and they are intentionally analog planners because one thing we're seeing in the digital space is we don't retain things quite as well. As I mentioned, I'm going to be spending a lot more time in the coming months talking about virtual and remote pathways. And working title for my upcoming book is Remote Pathways. It is all about the adventures of a team of remote workers. Now, I say team, or perhaps group is a better term, because we can see people coming at the remote space from all different lenses. I'm going to be talking a lot more in my writing about the adventures of Sujit, project manager, Joe, who's a virtual team leader, Mel, who's a coach, Mo, who's a creative solopreneur, Serge, who is a long-term entrepreneur in a remote space, and people like Eric, who are a remote worker. And I think these are some of the voices that represent who we have. And of course, we have people like Malcolm, the mentor, who meets with his mentee regularly in the virtual space. Ash is a work from anywhere millennial working remote. And as we meet Ash, you'll hear about their adventures in terms of marketing and working half a world away. So I think this work is really exciting. As someone who really, I cut my own teeth as a leader in the early 1990s in the remote space, connected with my team over long range radio. This was in the days before the internet. And remote really meant remote. When we were remote, we had to really ensure safety of our group members, of our team members, of our staff. So the times have changed, and we can really be connected on so many great apps in different ways. Ultimately, though, the skills are the same. And in today's call, I really want to zoom into some of those skills. And what I'm pulling on, of course, is from my 2017 book, Effective Virtual Conversations. There is a whole chapter. There are actually 3 chapters that if you have a copy, you'll want to take a look at. There is chapter number 10, and that is all about looking at what is termed in focus virtual team leadership development. How do we develop leaders in the remote space? And as Michael Fullan wrote in Leading a Culture of Change, he wrote, the more complex society gets, the more sophisticated leadership must become. And I think one thing we need to keep in mind is that leadership in the remote space today requires all of us, not just those leaders with title. All of us needs to step into the leadership space. So in today's call, I'm going to be talking about skills for all remote workers, whether we have a title of leader or not. And these are all things that we really do want to make sure we're equipping our team with. Before I forget and put the book down, just want to also draw your attention. If you have a copy of Effective Virtual Conversations, do check out chapter number 11, which is in focus virtual team development. And then chapter 12, which is all about partnering, co-facilitation, and creating a culture of effective virtual conversations. The lightning spark of thought generated in the solitary mind awakens it likeness in another mind. And that was Thomas Carlyle. Very much, we are all about working in the remote space. Now, in effective virtual conversations, I talk about this 3x3 matrix and 9 skills that I think are so critical for remote workers today. And we're going to go through these one by one. What I might offer up is an invitation for you to think about where are you now and where do you want to go. So you might even give yourself a baseline rating of a 1 to 10. Where are you in each of these skills? And we're going to look at them one at a time. Now, the first area, of course, is building relationships, and we do not operate in isolation. If you have visited my Teams 365 blog, which is found at my main site, potentialsrealized.com, you will have heard me regularly talk about the fact that we don't operate in a vacuum. And in fact, if you are a remote worker, I do encourage you to click on over to Teams 365 blog at potentialsrealized.com. That's potentials with an S, realized.com. That's my main company. And after 15 years of blogging and writing and supporting organizations and helping them with their teams, really a lot of this comes down to many of these 9 skill sets. These are not the easy skills to develop. These are the softer skills that require emotional intelligence. It require really us talking about some of the difficult issues. Part of that is grounded in relationships. As soon as we go remote, as soon as we work in a virtual space, we are leaning across and leading across so many different webs of relationships. If you are an entrepreneur, you might have a virtual assistant that is even in the same state or a different country than you. You might be working with other influencers, bloggers, Instagram fanatics. You might be working with different coaches or marketing experts or legal or financial advisors. If you are working as a remote corporate employee, you're going to be working with a variety of internal and external stakeholders, some that you may never meet. So the skill of building relationships in the virtual space is absolutely critical. And again, I want you to draw back beyond the length of this call today. Take a look over at the Teams 365 blog for a number of posts I've included on relationship building in the remote space. Part of what we want to do in our team meetings, if you're having regular team meetings, is not only focus on where we're going, but help us understand who we are. The challenge in the remote space today, as I write in Effective Virtual Conversations, is all we see is what's on the screen. So part of our challenge today is how do we expand the screen? And again, over to the Teams 365 blog, I'll be sharing this month and next month, the month of October 2019, more tips and ideas on how to expand the screen. There is, of course, an ebook, which I published about a year ago now on the A through the Z of remote and virtual team activities. So if you're looking for a bit of a collection, things that you can be doing in your team meetings to build relationships, create clarity, do some planning, do some focus, definitely check out the A through Z of remote and virtual team activities. There's instructions and different things that you can be doing. So if you have a copy of PlanDoTrack, here's where PlanDoTrack comes in. The first 125 pages of this planner is actually a workbook. And so if you turn through, you will see different activities you can take yourself and your team through. This is a great year-end gift. I have to say, and toot my own horn, there is a 12-month undated planner that can be started at any time, and also this workbook that you could be tackling as a team on a regular basis. So definitely take a look at it. Some of these exercises I'm pulling direct from the copy, and this is the activity of building relationships, which you'll find in section 3 or 4. Now, you may also be interested in another resource. I did a recent blog post over at coachingbusinessbuilder.com on the relationship web. I always like to think of relationships as a web. It's like very complex. No web is the same. And especially with relationships, our webs can change. So who are the relationships that you want to be building this month or maintaining or focusing on? We don't operate in isolation. I said that at the start of this focus on the first of 9 skills. So relationship building. Now, part of relationship building goes hand in hand with building trust. And in fact, building trust and connection, a huge focus for what we want to be doing in the remote space. It's such an important issue that I've dedicated multiple blog posts to this topic of building trust and connection in the remote space. You might also click on over to effectivevirtualconversations.com. I've got multiple calls that address how do we build trust and connection in a virtual context. So if you're holding meetings, what are the things we can be doing? And just like this, it comes back to the basics. You know, how reliable are we? Are we following through? Things get magnified in the remote space. So we almost want to over communicate without overdoing it, because people will drown it out. If we overdo, people will just stop listening. However, we need to really be signaling to team members and our colleagues, if we are a remote team member ourselves, we need to be letting people know what's on the go, what we're focusing on, how we can be of service, and maybe where our intersect is. So soft skills, again, become critical in building trust. It's how you're showing up. How is your tone? How respectful are you? Following cultural norms. Again, the challenge or one of the interesting nuances in the remote space is how do we operate in that virtual context? How savvy are we and knowledgeable are we of the different cultures we operate within? So we may have team culture. That may be the same or different than our organizational culture. And then each one of us as a remote worker is imbued by our own local and probably national culture as well. So building trust really can have some interesting areas, and it is a foundation going hand in hand with building relationships. So I'd like you to think very practically, what are the activities which are building trust on your team right now? Are you having regular meetings? Are you following through? Are you addressing issues as they come up? Or are they getting swept under the rug? As a Canadian, I know that like sweeping things under the rug are sometimes our preference. However, what happens is the rug gets so full, there's no more oxygen in the room. So are you addressing issues? Are you naming issues? Are you pointing to issues and addressing them later? So these are all things that we can be doing to build trust. Again, some great resources on this topic, The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. And I was also recommending an older book that I continue to refer back to, Rena and Rena's Trust and Betrayal in Today's Workplace. Even though it's an older book now, almost 15 years old, I think it's a great resource, and they have an excellent framework around trust. So 2 resources, Speed of Trust, Stephen Covey, and also Rena and Rena's Trust and Betrayal in Today's Workplace. Think about what you're doing right now to build up that trust account, as well as what's detracting from it. Now, going hand in hand with trust and also with relationships is creating trust and connection on the team. And as I said, I've done multiple calls on this topic of how do we create connection. One of the specific calls you'll want to check out, and you can go to youtube.com/effective group coach. Again, that's effective group coach over at youtube.com. It'll take you over to my Jennifer J. Britton channel. You can also just Google my name over at YouTube. You'll notice there are a number of different playlists that'll be of interest. Of course, Effective Virtual Conversations. And if you go into that playlist, you'll find a call from February 26, 2018, where I go through specific techniques to build trust and connection in the virtual space. If we're hosting a call, are we using people's names? Are we inviting them for insights? Are we getting them to share where they're calling in from? Are we creating a map of who we are and who's who on the call? So definitely take a look at that February 2018 call. You'll see some of this building trust and connection in the virtual space in action. We also want to create multiple touch points within the team. And so an earlier call this month for Effective Virtual Conversations was on hosting effective meetings. Even though our team schedules will likely be very different, I think what's important on the virtual and remote space is to keep things as consistent as possible. So one of the reasons why I host these calls on Monday at 11 a.m. throughout the month, at least 3 weeks of the month, is it's a consistent time. People know that my videos will be coming out Monday night, and they can really keep attuned to them. So think about what you're doing to create connection on the team. Is it in the larger groups? Are you doing peer partners? Are you actually having formal and informal mentoring on your team as well? Keep in mind, mentoring today is not just a top-down. There's a lot being written about around reverse mentoring as well. Okay, so for good resource for trust and connection, be sure to check out that February 2018 call under the Effective Virtual Conversations banner. Now, another thing we want to be doing as a team and as remote workers is providing clarity. And this goes to all of us. I think it's really useful to just bring it back to the basics, right? The workplace context is so complex, just keep it basic. So go back to the 5 W's. Every time you're communicating something really important, run through these 5 W's and an H. Who is it about? Where can they go? What's the issue about? What are the key milestones, or when do they need to take action? And why is this important? Also, in any communication, we might want to be providing detail around the how. As I said in multiple other calls around the remote workspaces, watch for your assumptions. And providing clarity in our message is really key. We almost want to go to the point of, again, over communication or over detail just to provide that clarity. If we don't specify enough things, then a lot can be read into our message, especially if our message is just on paper. So think about the clarity, the who, what, why, when, where, and how every time you're communicating key messages. If you're on the receiving end of the key messages, take a look at the message. Does it provide the detail you need around the 5 W's and an H, as I commonly call the who, what, why, where, when, and how? All right, next one. Tool for this might be downloading a copy of the Fall Sweep for your business. So last year at this time, I downloaded a weekly focused PlanDoTrack worksheet. I'll send it out again as we come into fall next week, actually. And it's just a thing, it's just a one-page worksheet where you can actually track what you're planning, doing, and tracking. It's a supplement to the PlanDoTrack resource. Clarity is about getting clear on our to-dos as well as our top 5 priorities. So these are some of the planning pages that you could be using on an individual basis or a collective basis as a team. And we do want to help our team members getting organized so that they're clear on the priorities, especially if they're part of a matrix team. Bringing us to, of course, on a matrix, we're typically working across differences. We may also be working across different teams. If you can imagine that these different colors of strings represent different teams, keep in mind that many of us are operating across teams. So take a look at, say, this white dot here. They're part of the green team, the blue team, and the red team. The green marker back here, they are also part of 3 teams, the yellow team, the blue team, and the red team. Or we have people like the green dot here, they are part of the yellow and also the green. What can happen in working in the remote space is we can find ourselves in a lot of crunches. And as the time crunches ensue, we do get a little more, we may be hurried. We may notice that like this team says that we're going to rush, but in fact, a rush for them is not like a rush for my other team. So if you are working across differences and parts of different matrices, it can be useful to isolate out what is the different team culture of the teams you're part of. How do we do things? What's important? What are our values? The ability to work across differences, to be fluid and diplomatic and generous and relaxed and also focused is really key. Now we have different teams and we also have different personalities. And this is where work around a strengths finder or a DISC really becomes such an invaluable tool to be working with. So for more on this, obviously a much more extended conversation. Here at Potentials Realize, we continue to do a lot of work using the DISC as well as using Strengths Finder. And if you're interested in doing a team day, having discussion around a team day, definitely reach out and let us know. That takes us into our next bucket, which is all about intercultural know-how. And again, great remote workers we've seen through experience or research are usually the ones that have worked remote before. In our travels, even if we don't leave our desk, we start learning so many different things. Not only like how do we say good morning, good afternoon, thank you in other languages, but there's a whole layering of understanding how each one of our team members is unique and their nationality is unique. And this is where understanding or building your global know-how, building your global knowledge base becomes so important. We want to check for assumptions and watch for assumptions. A lot of people know that I'm Canadian, but they say, Jen, you don't say A after every statement, or hey, you don't live in snow all the time. I've seen you outside in the summer months, in the, like in the sunshine and swimming in the river. Yes, we want to check our assumptions. So developing a muscle and a know-how around the whole intercultural global layer of the world is also really key. We are shaped by our experiences. We are shaped by the different countries in which we've lived. Part of what I appreciated so much of the first 15 years of my career was the fact that I did get to live and work across Central and South America, as well as Europe. And so as someone returning back to Canada, I bring those with me. And certainly a country like Canada, we're very multicultural, a city like Toronto being one of the most multicultural cities of the world. So even on a remote team, we don't have to leave our own country to really work interculturally or be sensitive to the intercultural dynamics. We can also be doing that in our backyard. And I think this is an ongoing area for all of us. I would even say myself included. And I say that as someone who has worked interculturally for 30 years. My family is intercultural. We are a mix of Canadian and Caribbean. And that certainly is a really important piece that every day I still also continue to learn. So for more on this, again, in Effective Virtual Conversations, I talk more about the work of Gert Hofstede. I really think that Hofstede's research and work is an excellent framework. It's not the only one out there, but it really helps us navigate how might we need to adjust our communication patterns. Do people have a preference for working as a team or individuals? What sort of risk are people comfortable to undertake? How do we like to communicate? How direct or indirect are we? And I see this so much of the time. I'm still very involved in doing intercultural briefings for people who come to work in Canada or Canadians who are going to work abroad, and even abroad in the US. Right? A lot of people think Canada, the US, you must be the same. We are very, very different cultures. And so again, if we look at a research frame like Hofstede, it can start to help us unpack how we are different. And within that, that helps us work more effectively. To the notion of working across differences, there may be cultural differences, but there may also be personality differences. And I think this is an interesting area for all remote workers to become aware of. What's that balance of, like, how is Jen really Canadian? Like, am I a true Canadian? Is there a true Canadian? Well, certainly you might find I'm a little bit more polite, less direct. Maybe my communication pattern is perhaps a little more rounded than others you have met. But I've also learned, having worked interculturally and globally for many years, that I need to become more pointed with my comments. I need to be a little bit more assertive in terms of going to bat for things that I take a stand for, and especially around conflict. Unlike more typical patterns here in Canada where we might ignore it or become very passive aggressive, I think we need to address it very head on. So intercultural know-how, key, take a look. This might be a learning edge for all of you. And that's a little different than another area that I wanted to point us to, innovation, right? Innovation is about creating new things or pulling pieces together to create something new. Innovation in the remote space is critical. And it's not only in the work that we do, but in our processes. Many times we may need to be doing what we called in the 80s MacGyvering. MacGyver being, of course, this guy who was able to create anything or solve any problem. Well, you know, we are facing very complex challenges. As someone, myself, I taught climate change in 1993 and 1994. In those days, most people didn't agree that there was an issue around climate change. We knew that innovation, creative problem solving would be needed. And that's been a big part of the world of my work. How do we spark conversations that are a bit provocative in service to creating something new, in service to thinking outside of the box? So critical thinking is really essential. Strategic thinking is really essential. And some of this also comes back to, like, knowing your relationships and building your base, right? Innovation is about finding differences, looking outside of where we might normally look and find solutions. So there is a whole element here of cross-disciplinary learning that I think is embedded in innovation. And that goes hand in hand. As soon as we're doing cross-disciplinary learning, that takes us back to relationships again. So resilience and agility, key. I just talked about some of those global challenges. Part of resilience and agility also links back to relationships. How are we able to flex with things? And it may mean that we have to partner with other people. Collaboration is really a key skill set. And again, the last chapter of Effective Virtual Conversations goes into collaboration. If you have PlanDoTrack, you'll also know that there's a very heavy focus in most of the sections on collaboration. I'm just flipping through here, but one of the big questions, page 124, is like, how do you collaborate with others to get things done? Are you going to do it? Are you going to delegate it? Are you going to defer it? Are you going to work with others? There's also some elements here where you can look at collaboration. Who can you collaborate with? How do you work effectively together? And that is really quite key to understand who you're working with and how they prefer to operate as well. So in remote work, we are constantly collaborating, sometimes collaborating with people we may never physically meet. And I say that in the last 15 years of my business, some of my closest collaborators, we've only ever physically met once or not even. And so we can do that, like in the virtual space, we can just do so much in our weekly meetings. Now, part of remote success to do is a whole skill set around intentionality. It is about having an intentional focus. What are we aiming for? How are we coming from good intent? How are we sharing that with others? Because inevitably in the remote space, we're making decisions. We may not have a full picture. And I think communicating our intentions can be a very important way to say, here's where I'm going to. I might not be able to foresee all of the ins and outs that come along there, but my end result is this, or my intention is that. So how are you practicing intentionality in your work? All of this leads back to the importance, I hope, you're seeing of something else. So in addition to the 9 skills, and we'll go back here, just take a look through again. We had our 9 skills: building relationships, building trust, creating connection, providing clarity. I just talked about intentionality. We looked at the ability to work across differences, which might also be connected with building your intercultural know-how. It is also about innovation and being flexible, agile, and resilient. Many of these are not skills that you are born with. They're things that we develop. We develop through experience and also feedback. And part of what I want to really be encouraging you to do as you step into your work this year is think about how your team culture can support you. We are part of a remote team, and we may be part of multiple teams. It can be useful, and I'm taking this slide from an earlier call, but on to think about our team culture. Who are we? How do we do things? And what is important? And our team culture can really be set up by many different doorways, including best team activities, working around norms, and working around values. As I said, there's a lot of things that we could be adding to our toolbox. One of the reasons why I do what I do today is because as a former remote team leader, I had to develop my team. And that made me realize I didn't have all the skills I needed to really support my team members. So think about your team culture. For more resources on this, do check out the 52 weeks guide as well as PlanDoTrack. Another call, we're going to be looking at teamwork skills from communication to influence to collaboration and technology. Do keep in touch with that, and definitely check out the exercises that I've mentioned. Some that you might want to check out are the virtual remote wheel, also the table on pages 8 and 9, and finally, think about where you're coming at this. Are you a project manager? Are you coming at it from marketing, or are you a remote worker? More coming on these pathways. Who are we? What kind of issues are important for us? And with that, I want to thank you for joining us for PlanDoTrack. It's all about helping you with your goals, helping you create your vision, and supporting you in planning. Join me for some one-on-one coaching, VIP days at the Coaching Biz Growth Lab, or for some of our team supports. And you can reach me, of course, at info@potentialsrealized.com. I'm going to be working with a number of additional facilitators, and I look forward to that, so stay tuned. Programs will kick off October 8th as well as November 25th for those that want to take this body of work out into their teams. So with that, thanks so much. Have a great week, month, and I will be posting this, of course, as one of our PlanDoTrack calls. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.